Have you ever had the strange feeling that, despite everything seeming normal, there's something deeply wrong with the world around you? As if we're all following a routine, smiling in photos, getting things done. But inside, something is silently screaming. There's an invisible epidemic that doesn't make the news, but it's everywhere. Collective mental illness. No, we're not just talking about clinical diagnoses, but a widespread disconnection that affects the meaning of life, human bonds, self-esteem, and the way we relate to time, to others, and to ourselves. It's as if society has developed symptoms of a collective emotional collapse, and worse, has learned to call it modern life. This video is an invitation, not to easy answers but to deep reflection. Let's understand together how, step by step, we've normalized suffering, glorified toxic productivity, and replaced real connections with likes. Along this journey you'll recognize patterns, see yourself reflected, maybe even nervously laugh at a few truths, but above all you'll find paths. Paths to reconnect with yourself and, who knows, inspire others to do the same. There's a kind of silence that invades the soul when it finds itself directionless. It's not the absence of noise but of meaning. Many people, even surrounded by material achievements and daily activities, feel like leaves in the wind, carried by external forces but without internal roots. It's like living on autopilot, where each day becomes just another colorless repetition. This disconnection from the purpose of living doesn't appear suddenly. It settles like dust, unseen but gradually covering everything. Modern society tends to sell the idea that purpose is tied to productivity, status, or professional success. But when you achieve all of that and still feel empty, you realize something is deeply wrong. Human beings aren't made just of goals and tasks. There's a visceral need to feel part of something greater, to have authentic bonds and grounded values. Viktor Frankl, a concentration camp survivor and the creator of logotherapy, said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how." And maybe that's exactly what's missing, the why. The meaning of life can be hidden in the simplest and most human things, like caring for someone, creating something with your hands, or finding beauty in an ordinary afternoon. It doesn't need to be grand or applauded, but it needs to be real. An 80-year-old woman who spent her life tending her garden once said, "Every flower that blooms here reminds me I can still bloom too." And that's what many have forgotten, that there's still time to bloom, even in the midst of chaos. Searching for meaning isn't easy, but it doesn't have to be a burden. It can start small. Reading books like Man's Search for Meaning, writing letters to yourself, or simply noticing what makes your heart beat faster. Finding purpose isn't a destination, it's a path. And the more we walk it, the more we discover it was always closer than we thought. We live in an era where resting has become almost a sin, and being busy is a status symbol. Extreme productivity, disguised as virtue, has infiltrated the core of society as if it were synonymous with personal worth. "You're worth what you produce," is the hidden message hammered day after day. And in this frantic rhythm, many people lose themselves trying to reach an unattainable perfection, suffocated by goals, lists, and impossible expectations. The curious thing is that all this haste slows us down inside. Emotions are ignored, relationships become shallow, and the body screams while the mind stays silent. Burnout, once limited to specific fields, has become almost an emotional epidemic. The pursuit of recognition at any cost becomes a vicious cycle, where resting causes guilt and overworking causes illness. It's as if the clock is always fast but the soul is always late. And ironically, the more you produce, the less you live. The feeling of always chasing something creates chronic anxiety, like an endless escalator. We need to relearn how to stop, not as an escape but as an act of courage. Meditating 5 minutes a day, walking aimlessly, listening to music with eyes closed. Small rituals that bring us back to presence. Because productivity without purpose becomes a prison. If we really want to live well, we need to reclaim time as an ally, not as an executioner. To learn that value lies not in speed but in intention. That yes, work is important but truly living is essential. As Seneca said, "It's not that we have little time but that we waste much of it." Maybe it's time to stop, not to give up, but to find yourself again. We've never been so connected and at the same time so alone. It's a modern contradiction that borders on absurd. Thousands of followers, real-time conversations, likes every second. But a void that echoes when the screen goes dark. Human beings, relational by essence, have traded hugs for emojis, deep conversations for sped-up voice notes, and comforting silences for constant notifications. Technology, which could connect us, often separates us silently. Social media has created a dangerous illusion that connection is measured by digital interaction. But being present goes far beyond replying to messages. It's about feeling the other person, listening without haste, looking into someone's eyes. Many no longer know how to start a conversation outside of a keyboard. The fear of silence between two real bodies has become terrifying. And it's in this abyss disguised as connection that loneliness blooms, silent, but devastating. A young woman told me that when she posted happy photos, she got dozens of comments, but when she cried alone, no one noticed. That reveals the emotional lie we're trapped in. We've created versions of ourselves to please the algorithm but lost touch with who we really are. The result? Deep emotional isolation camouflaged by likes that, deep down, don't hug, don't listen, don't comfort. Reclaiming real connections takes courage. The courage to say, "Want to grab a coffee?" instead of just reacting with a heart emoji. The courage to make a surprise call, to sit at the table without a phone, to write letters. It may seem old-fashioned, but these are the gestures that heal. Real relationships demand presence, and presence can't be shared via Wi-Fi. It requires time, attention, and presence. Nowadays, being too tired, too anxious, or emotionally unstable is no longer a warning sign, it's become normal. Society, used to constant running, has come to treat suffering as routine. Phrases like, "everyone feels this way," or "this is just adult life," cover up an alarming reality. People falling ill in silence, thinking it's weakness to stop, that asking for help is being dramatic. This normalization trivializes pain and deepens the soul's wound. It's not natural to wake up every day with an unexplained heaviness in your chest, pretending to be fine on the outside while falling apart inside. When serious symptoms are treated as passing phases, suffering stops being acknowledged and starts being ignored. And then, instead of empathy, people receive shallow advice, as if the cure lies in thinking positive or being more grateful. But mental health requires more than self-help slogans. Pain, when not heard, screams. And when it screams, it's mistaken for weakness. We need to create a new emotional culture, where feeling isn't seen as a sign of imbalance, but of humanity. Being sad doesn't need justification. Having bad days shouldn't bring guilt. A healthy mind is one that allows itself to be whole, with all its nuances, light and shadow, peace and conflict, strength and fragility. Change begins in honest conversation, in listening without judgment, in care that isn't rushed. Seeking help isn't failure, it's a fight. Reading works that approach mental health in accessible ways, like the books of Augusto Curry or Brené Brown, can be a good start. But the most important thing is remembering, no one should have to get used to suffering. Life is challenging, yes, but it should never be a lonely burden. There's an invisible dictatorship that dictates, be strong all the time. And out of fear of seeming weak, many people wear smiles as armor. The problem is that armor, though it seems like protection, is heavy. So heavy that, over time, it suffocates emotional truth. The pressure to always be okay doesn't generate resilience, it generates repression. And what's repressed doesn't disappear. It just hides, waiting for the right moment to implode from within. In a world that values only performance, vulnerability becomes a social risk. Showing sadness is almost an act of rebellion. But ironically, it's in shared pain that true connection is born. People don't bond through perfection, but through shared experience. A sincere tear has more power to generate empathy than 1,000 memorized motivational quotes. Pretending to be constantly strong doesn't inspire, it creates distance. A man once said he cried in the office bathroom because real men don't suffer. What he didn't know is that his pain is more common than he thinks, and that his humanity is his greatest strength. We are made of emotions. Ignoring them is like refusing half of our existence. Laughing is important, of course, but crying is too. And that's okay. Emotions are internal compasses, not obstacles to overcome. Allowing yourself to feel is a revolutionary act. Expressing sadness, fear, or doubt with someone you trust can open doors to relief and healing. Psychotherapy, conversation circles, emotional writing practices, all of these help. As Carl Jung once said, what you resist, persists. So instead of resisting, how about embracing? Maybe it's in that embrace that the long-sought peace finally reveals itself. On the glowing showcase of social media, everyone seems to live perfect lives. Sculpted bodies, dream vacations, movie-like relationships. But behind every post there are filters, not just visual but emotional. Constant comparison is born from this illusion. We look at other stages and judge our own backstage. And without realizing it, we wear down our self-esteem as if our lives are always missing something. It's a competition disguised as inspiration. This image culture imposes a silent but relentless pressure. With every scroll, the brain registers patterns that become references. And when we don't fit into them, we feel left behind. But no one posts existential crises, sleepless nights, internal doubts. And yet, that's what everyone experiences. Comparison is, in fact, distortion. No one has all the answers, just good angles. A teenager once told me he stopped using social media for a while because every time he saw happy photos of classmates, he felt like his life was wrong. After some time offline, he started reading books like Steal Like an Artist, making collages in a notebook, and journaling. He discovered something valuable, that his own authenticity can be more beautiful than any standard. Self-esteem is born from self-acceptance, not from others' approval. If you're going to compare yourself, let it be with yourself. Who you were yesterday, the choices you've overcome, the courage no one saw. Looking for references can inspire, of course, as long as it doesn't become a prison. True beauty is in the imperfect, the spontaneous, the real. And deep down, that's what everyone wants, to be accepted exactly as they are without having to live a beautiful lie. Listening seems simple, but it's rare. In an era where everyone wants to talk and fast, truly listening has become almost a lost art. Conversations are often just pauses between monologues. And when no one truly listens, empathy disappears. The world becomes a space of overlapping voices, but deep internal silences. Each one trapped in their bubble, waiting for their turn to respond, but not to understand. The absence of listening creates an emotional abyss. Without it, there's no connection, no healing. A young person might spend years trying to say, "I'm not okay," but if the answer is always, "You'll get over it, be strong," they stop trying. Listening isn't just hearing words, it's perceiving what's between the lines, embracing what wasn't said, being present with your heart, not just your ears. Empathy is born from this place, real presence without judgment. Some say the world has gone cold. But maybe it's just gone deaf. Empathy takes effort, it requires stepping out of yourself to step into another, even for a moment. Asking, "How are you?" with genuine interest can change someone's day. Practices like active listening groups, group therapy, or even weekly conversations with friends can help revive this essential skill, to truly be there fully for someone. No technology replaces human affection. Likes don't hug. Reactions don't comfort. What heals is the attentive gaze, the "tell me I'm here," the silence that embraces without needing to be filled. When we begin to truly listen to one another, maybe collective loneliness will give way to a silent but powerful support network. And maybe then, little by little, the world will become a place where we listen and feel deeply again. In the modern construction of identity, many have come to define themselves by what they have, not by who they are. Consumption has ceased to be a tool and has become a symbol of personal worth. Cars, clothes, trips, titles, everything has become a kind of measure of importance. But behind the shine of these acquisitions often hides a cracked, fragile identity that depends on the next purchase to feel alive. It's the void being covered up with labels. The problem isn't wanting comfort or beauty, but believing that's what defines us. The obsession with status creates an endless race where no one truly wins, because there will always be someone who has more. And in this constant pursuit, the essence gets left behind. Authenticity is traded for appearance. Peace is traded for approval. And the human being drifts away from themselves while trying to get closer to an unreachable ideal. Once, I heard something I never forgot. The only things that truly belong to me are what I can carry in my memory and in my heart. That sums it all up. Building solid values is like planting a tree. It may take time, but it creates roots that sustain. Cultivating kindness, integrity, generosity, these are the real assets. And the curious thing is, the stronger these values are, the less you feel the need to prove anything to others. Revisiting our values is an act of courage and freedom. Instead of following the script imposed by the market, why not write your own? Trade "I have to have" for "I want to be." And above all, remember, a well-lived life is not the one that impresses, it's the one that makes sense to the one living it. There are pains that are not only individual. They cross generations, silent but significant, like inherited scars. Wars, dictatorships, economic crises, pandemics. Events like these don't go unnoticed by the collective soul. When they're not processed, digested, understood, they become open wounds that repeat in patterns of fear, distrust, and emotional numbness. It's as if the whole of society carried an ungrieved mourning, a pain that no one had time to name. The problem is that, without a name, trauma disguises itself. It shows up as unchecked anger, widespread apathy, normalized aggression. People don't notice, but they react to life as if they're always on alert. It's the body at war inside, even in times of apparent peace. The collective denial of trauma prevents emotional growth. It's like trying to build a house on unstable ground. Sooner or later, everything collapses. Collective trauma only begins to heal when we recognize that it exists. We can begin this healing with more spaces for listening, emotional education in schools, with films, books, and art that tell the stories that were silenced. Intergenerational conversations, memory circles, community therapy, all of this helps recover what was lost and build new narratives. Because denying the past doesn't erase it. But looking at it with courage can indeed transform the future. There is a silence deeper than the absence of sound. It's the silence of the forgotten soul. In the constant noise of notifications, the rush of commitments, and the avalanche of content, many people have lost touch with their inner world. They no longer know what they feel, what they want, what moves them. They live outwardly but are empty inside. Like dry leaves blown by the wind, they move but don't know where they're going. This existential emptiness isn't solved with shopping, likes, or trips. It's a calling. A calling from the soul for meaning, for pause, for listening. And those who don't answer this call live in constant discomfort, a kind of floating anguish with no name, no apparent cause. That's why so many feel exhausted even after a productive day. Because the body can rest, but the soul needs meaning to breathe. Almost all of us have heard the phrase, "I have everything I wanted and still feel empty." That's not rare. Because when the soul is silenced, nothing feels like enough. That's where spiritual and existential practices come in, not as dogmas but as bridges. Walking in nature, meditating, writing about yourself, questioning beliefs, talking to wise people, listening to music with attention. All of that can be spiritual. All of that can be sacred. Reconnecting with your inner self is remembering that we are more than roles and profiles. We are beings with a thirst for depth. And that depth begins in silence. A silence that doesn't oppress but reveals. As Nietzsche once said, "He who has a reason to live can bear almost anything." Maybe your soul is just waiting to be heard. And when that happens, the emptiness will finally begin to be filled with what truly matters. In the end, the question is no longer why are we getting sick, but how long will we ignore that we are? A society that silences emotion, idolizes perfection, and turns suffering into routine is slowly disconnecting from what's most human. But there's still time. Time to slow down. To listen more and judge less. To trade performance for presence. To remember that feeling is not weakness, it's a sign of life. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't need to have all the answers. Sometimes, the most revolutionary thing is just to be honest with yourself. To breathe. To reflect. To begin again. Because healing begins when the truth appears. And maybe, just maybe, the transformation of an entire society begins with a single gesture. Yours. Remember, you are not alone. And your pain isn't drama, it's a sign that something needs more care and attention. If this video made sense to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any content like this. Because as long as there's reflection, there is hope. And as long as there is hope, there is a way.